It took me years to realize that the thing that I lost in my marriage wasn't love. It was something far more dangerous than that. And I think that losing it did far more damage than I could have ever predicted. I never stopped loving Esme, but I did stop discovering who she was becoming. I met Esme when I was 18 years old, right after moving up from Los Angeles up to Washington State, where we live now. And I was sitting in my English class with my one friend that I had at the time, and this stunning woman walked into the door. She was like nothing I'd ever seen. She certainly wasn't the type of girl that I typically was interested in at 18 years old, but something about her was consuming. When she walked in those doors, my whole world shifted. Naturally, as a 18-year-old man who has just become extremely infatuated with a beautiful woman, I made a massive scene and I made everybody in the room really uncomfortable about being there. But that was day one of what has turned into 21 and counting beautiful years with Esme, the love of my life. And back then, early on, I pursued her relentlessly, tirelessly. She wanted nothing to do with me. And I was loud, obnoxious, still am. And I smoked. I no longer do that, which is good. But everything that I was really wasn't of any interest to her. But I didn't let that stop me. That certainly didn't stand in my way. I wanted to know who she was, what made her tick, the things that she liked doing on her free time, what she was studying, what she wanted to be when she grew up. I wanted to know her more and better than anybody on the face of this planet. And I wanted to be around her every moment of the day. Back then, looking back on it, my attention and my affection towards her was freely given. And she knew that she was at the forefront of my mind day in and day out. And eventually I did trick her into loving me, praise be to God. And our priorities changed. We graduated from college, I went off to the military, and the normal cycle of life kind of started up. Bills, responsibilities, mortgage, kids, all of the things that we all deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I unintentionally started to put my attention and my focus everywhere except for in our relationship. Because I think in some ways I had mentally checked the box to say, yep, I love her, I've proven it, but doing that was a horrendous mistake, one that would cost me for several years to come. Because what I set in motion wasn't a giant explosion, it was a slow erosion, it was death by a thousand cuts. I quietly stopped running to her with all those little things that happen in my day. I stopped wanting to tell her about all of the frustrations and aspirations that I had in my life. And I stopped asking her about those things in her life. I started viewing her as somebody that I knew, not as somebody that I still needed to discover. And it really wasn't until after our third child that I really started to connect the dots on what it was that I was doing. I was intentional with my career, I was intentional with providing a good life for my family, but I was no longer being intentional with my relationship and how it was that I was showing up for Esme. Essentially, I was putting all of my time, effort, and energy into my career and into my responsibilities, and then I was on autopilot everywhere else in my life. And as a result, Esme and the kids, they had to learn how to live life without me. And I think in many ways, they had to learn to live life in spite of me. And that's a really difficult truth to have to think about. And I want to be clear that the issue was never that I didn't love her. I always loved her immensely, and I still do. The issue is that I stopped being curious about who she was becoming. And the interesting thing about being curious is it's the only thing that protects us from making assumptions, because it is very rare that we ever make any real, positive, and correct assumptions. I think I believed that curiosity was something that I graduated from. And now the discovery portion of my relationship was over, and now it's on to the providing. But fortunately, I was able to figure all of this out, and I started to try to be more curious like I was in those early days. I started asking her questions. I started to ask about her dreams. I started to listen more intently. I started to just want to be in her presence and make her the center stone of my life once again. And doing all of these things, something started to shift, and not externally. It started to shift internally, inside of myself. And it didn't shift all at once. And don't get me wrong, I still drop the ball constantly. I still constantly make mistakes. But that's not what's important. What's important is that it's no longer my norm. My new norm is that I am curious about her. I do ask her questions. I am present with her like I once was all those years ago. And over time, she started to trust that I am that man. And in some ways, I would love to go back and just slap the shit out of my younger self. I would love to look him in the eye and tell him to stay curious. You may know who she is right now, but you have no idea who she's becoming. And that is what matters. Because who she is right now is not who she's becoming. And that means that your job of discovering that isn't done yet either. Staying curious and discovering her daily, that is how you practice loving someone. So I want to ask you all, how curious are you about your partner right now? Are you still trying to discover them? Or have you settled on who it is that you think they have become? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Let me know down in the comments. I'll talk to you all soon. Cheers.